folks, and welcome to my stream of work. Today I'm going to focus on specifically being an English teacher who is on the codependent end of the spectrum. If you're unaware of what codependency is, let me just tell you in a nutshell that codependency is a style of relating with other people, which implies adopting the other person's needs and values and interests so that you don't feel rejected by them, so that you feel accepted by them, probably because you've gone through a trauma of rejection when you were younger or anything like that. I am currently a recovering codependent. I'm working very closely and attentively and in a dedicated way on restoring my personal boundaries and relating with people from a healthier perspective. And I find that this topic, the topic of mental health and also how we create relationships, is a very important point to discuss in this current day society, so that we stop creating this vision of ourselves as being always perfect and things like that, and also realizing that everyone is going through their struggles and that we can stop idealizing each other as an end result. So I'm going to focus on something specifically that I did through the prism of codependency that I feel influenced my teaching greatly. And maybe you recognize yourself in this line of teaching. So if you do, make sure you leave a comment down below. So the first thing that I used to do quite a bit as a codependent and codependency influencing my teaching was I was trying to get liked by the client or the student so much. I cared so much whether I was liked by the student that I failed to recognize honestly and directly the mistakes that the student was making when they were practicing their English with me. Since the beginning of my career, I have been positioning myself as a teacher of conversational English lessons, and obviously being unable to honestly and authentically reflect back to the student what mistakes they were making during their practicing sessions was a detrimental thing to their English level. And to be fair, after I realised that I was severely codependent, I started taking committed action towards alleviating this tendency within my teaching behaviour so that my lessons could become more enriching from the student's perspective. Another area of my life where my codependency took its toll was valuing the time and also keeping an eye on the length of each lesson. I would care a lot about responding to my students' feelings appropriately, much to the degree where I was unable to stop the lesson when the lesson was coming to an end. I teach 50-minute lessons, and I feel that this 50-minute format is the best format for me and the student, because we can keep our attention on the process at hand. But very often people would start telling something just by the end of the lesson, and I felt as if it was not okay to cut in and allow the person to know that this was the end of the lesson, that the time was up. And because of that, I would splash out my psychic energy in all directions. We tend to value our time, right? So we tend to do things that we feel make up the effective schedule. When the lessons were finished in a willy-nilly way, both for the student and for myself, there was a moment when it kind of got out of the planned state of flow. So we got out of the flow and we just started discussing things, and then it just dragged on a bit, and I felt like I was losing my energy so much during those moments. I'm very happy that I have realized this now, and I think that both for yourself, if you're a teacher like myself, and your student, it's going to be a good idea to know that the lesson has its limits so that you can plan that time effectively and gain value, each of you, out of that pre-decided time slot. Another thing that I would do a lot is I would determine the level of my student and actually add up a little bit to that level, telling the student that they were actually one level above the actual level that I felt they were at. Not a very good thing for a teacher to do either, because I think that if a teacher does that, they're creating an unrealistic expectation for the student, and the student does not really get a clear reflection. When I'm contemplating the reasons for why most students go and hire private tutors, the first thing that springs to mind is that a person just wants a reflection of their English level and of the things that they cannot do very well yet, that they just cannot get on their own. That's why they go and get an external reflector, a mirror. That is the teacher. And if a mirror is broken or a mirror is inadequate, then the student does not get the value for money that they're choosing to pay, right? So I think just being precise and being honest does not mean that we're being not nice. And it has taken me quite a while to realise, to be fair. So right now I can feel that I'm more consistent with the feedback that I give, because I realise that if I'm honest, if I'm authentic, if I tell the student the way things are, they're not going to abandon me. So it boiled down to a very personal reason for why I was not doing the correct things, the professional things, to be fair. And right now I'm realising this, it's a massive liberation. I would also try too hard to be extra nice with the students by saying thank you 1,000 times and then please, if you don't mind, things like that. Yes, we do realise that the English language is very rich in indirect questions, but personally I would take it too far, and when interacting with a student I would just splash out those expressions on top of them so that the bit of information that would save on the student's time and also on my personal time was very, very scarce, and it was usually by the end of the sentence. I think that took from the overall time that the student and I had. And personally right now, as I'm restoring my personal boundaries, I'm discovering that in an authentic relationship, if you're sharing the information with your client, it's about the quality and precision of information that the client will use to see how professional you are and how caring you are. So again, counterintuitively, the care that we show for the client is not about a million thank yous. It's rather about the precision of the information that is considerate of the student's time. Now, on a slightly different note, if we're talking emotions, my students were people from all walks of life. Just like in everybody's experience, we all meet various people, we interact with various people, a plethora of people on an everyday basis. So some of my clients were acting inappropriately, and as a codependent person who would allow people to walk over me because I was very far on that end of the spectrum, to be honest, I did not necessarily allow them to know that it was not okay to display that type of behaviour with me. I'm not even talking about flirtatious relationships or anything like that. I'm talking more about people just being dismissive. I was feeling like I could not say anything to them because of that internal block of being afraid to be rejected. I remember one student calling me up once and asking if it would be okay if he could come and visit me, because I would teach face-to-face back then, and I would have a little room where I would teach in my parents' flat. So I also used to have a cat at that time, a massive fluffy cat with a kind of massive tail, a very beautiful cat. He's gone now, but I used to love him a lot. I still love him. So my student, who was very willing to start having lessons with me, occurred to find himself in a situation where he just couldn't get a dog sitter for his dog. So it was the time when he just got a little dog and he wanted the dog to be around him at all times because it could not find anyone to be around his dog for the time of the lesson. That student would drive a car and he would ask me, "Is it going to be okay, Lilia, if I just bring my dog along with me to the lesson?" Even though I had a cat and my cat was quite old at that time, so he was reaching the end point of his life, and I could sense that my cat would not be very happy about the presence of the dog in the house, I still allowed that student to bring over that dog because I felt like if I hadn't, that would have ruined my rapport with that student. So you see how far I could go to create rapport with a student, like to create any inconvenience on my side so that a student was happy. And then I allowed him to come and I said, okay, so he would bring his dog along, and this dog's, we started having a lesson, so we started interacting, and that dog started running around the house and wreaking havoc just everywhere it went. It went to the kitchen, and just in one swoop of the tongue, it would eat everything that the cat had on his plate. So that was a quite distressing situation for me, and even though it happened, and I could hear that dog was running riot around the house, I told nothing. I told my student literally nothing. So I did not draw his attention to that fact. I did not just dismiss the lesson and say, okay, so can you just leave, and maybe some other time when you know where you can just put the dog, you can come back and we can have a lesson then. I did not say that because I was afraid of that student's rejection. I've recently discovered a very important way about myself that I'd love to share with you as an end note. I have discovered that because of my childhood traumas, where my codependency started, I adopted this style of relating to people where I felt as if I do something in a wrong way that will take away from my professionalism as an English teacher, that would take away from my ability to interact in English very well. It felt almost like as if a person would view me as an amazing hero, and then I would do something that they would consider as bad. I would fall off that pedestal immediately. So that was the way in which I viewed the world. And now that I have become aware of that filter, I'm working with that filter. I'm doing a lot of integration work on myself, a lot of psychological work on myself that has to do with realizing where the source of this behavior is, where it was, and what I can do to incorporate a healthier relationship with other people. And I noticed that this is a relationship style that many people resort to, especially many young women resort to. Tell me if this is a theme in your country, because in Ukraine, where I'm right now, it's a massive theme. It's a massive theme. So women feel like we have to fight for men, so still to a large degree. Feel free to disagree, a codependent in me speaking, but that is something that I notice a lot, and I think becoming aware of our codependent patterns really helps us unveil the way back to an open heart and an authentic communication style in relationships that is so satisfying and super rewarding. I can't even tell you. I've started discovering authentic communication recently, and I must tell you, it's such a grandiose thing. I can't recommend it enough. I think I'll be doing an online course, a video course having to do with English for authentic communication, so keep an eye on that. Bear with me. Thank you so much for coming to my channel and checking on this video. Please give this video a like, but only if you have enjoyed this video. And if you have found it useful, make sure you share it with a friend or a colleague or another person who you think might need this support. Because I think there are so many things that we share in this world these days. And sharing our mental health reservations and concerns and the things that we have successfully overcome and understood is a great step in the direction of creating a world that is authentic, where people are not afraid of being themselves in all our entirety, and where we can share things openly without judgment and be truly inclusive. Stay conscious. See you soon.